Hello everyone, and welcome to the Land Use Academy of Utah. My name is Brent Bateman. I'm the lead attorney at the Office of the Property Rights Ombudsman. And joining me here today for our discussion is Chris Gamvroulas from the Property Rights Coalition. Hey Chris.
Hey Brent,
How are you?
I'm well, thanks for having me.
Good, good. Chris, before we start, tell us a little bit about the Property Rights Coalition.
So the Property Rights Coalition is a group that we formed back in 2006, primarily of residential developers and home builders.
Okay.
We got together to advocate for ordinances and statutes that related to zoning and development codes because there was really nobody talking about those things except city attorneys and private attorneys who were suing cities.
Oh.
And so we saw that there was a space to have the conversation with practitioners of land development and that we could hopefully avoid some of the problems that we had seen. Not necessarily to put the attorneys out of business, but certainly to give some context by the practitioners who were actually doing the work. So we got together, and since 2006, we've been working collaboratively with your office, with the League of Cities and Towns, with the Association of Counties, with others, and bringing the voices from the private side, the Property Rights Coalition, the home builders, and the realtors.
Property Rights Ombudsman, Property Rights Coalition, not affiliated, but definitely have the same goals, and that's making sure that property rights get protected.
Yeah, absolutely. Property rights are vital to our democracy, to our form of government, to the operation of government, and while they're not absolute, we've given up some of that to zoning so that we could live in a society, in a more structured society.
You bet.
So we've given up a few of those things, and we understand that. But at the same time, once the rules are established, people who have those property rights have a reasonable expectation that they will be protected.
So I understand you have a message for private citizens and local governments today. What is that message?
Well, first off, it's thank you. It's thanks for your service. People get involved in local government because they want to be involved, because they want to participate, and it's a sacrifice of time, and we certainly appreciate that. No one ever got rich, being a local city council member. It's a real sacrifice, so thank you. We're all in this together. We actually do need each other, and we're really not the enemy. It's important for local officials to remember that cities don't build cities. We build the cities. We take the risk. We finance infrastructure. We finance construction. We've paid our design consultants. We paid the city's engineering staff. We've paid development fees and planning fees, and we pay permit fees and impact fees. And so we're paying our way. No one's asking for a handout, but at the end, we're actually implementing the general plan.
So your work is how the city functions. It's how the city receives revenue. It's how the city's plan gets implemented.
Yeah, absolutely. Most of the time, general plans are pretty well thought out and pretty well written. And zoning maps, by and large, reflect what is in that general plan. And cities that aren't growing either don't have a really healthy economy around them, but the cities, particularly along the Wasatch Front in Washington County that have vibrant economies are growing. And so we're part of that. We're part of that process of building that community.
So the cities and the private developers have the same goal, trying to build a beautiful city.
Trying to build a beautiful city. Where our goals diverge a little bit is we're profit motivated, and that doesn't mean we don't want the best city. We want to derive a reasonable profit.
But a beautiful product, a beautiful city is going to lead to better profits for you.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So why is it so often that developers are considered to be the bad guys?
Well, probably for a couple of reasons. One is that communities may have had an experience with a bad developer,
Sure.
a bad actor. And And that can happen, just like with any other profession. Unfortunately, we in the development community, we're very prominent in the community. When we build something, everybody sees it. A lot of people see it. And if something goes wrong, people hear about it. The other is that because we are profit motivated in the end, sometimes people have this instinctive feeling that they're being harmed if someone else is going to make a profit. And we see a lot of that, and it's a difficult thing to try and navigate in a public process.
But if you can't make a profit, you can't do business, and if you can't do business, you can't build the city.
That's right, and you'll invest somewhere else.
These folks who often think you're the enemy, they come to planning commission meeting. How should a local government respond to that?
Public engagement and public dialogue, public comments are very healthy. Most people in the development community really do appreciate the public engagement, and it should be encouraged. And we sit and take, very good notes, because we'll always get a nugget or two of some great ideas. It's when it changes to public clamor, and that becomes very counterproductive in the public process.
Can you explain what public clamor means?
It's one of those things where you know it when you see it.
Sure.
It's when emotion comes into the process over reasonable and rational thought.
Facts as opposed to opinions, for example.
Absolutely.
So local government officials are programmed to listen to and respond to these kind of concerns that you're talking about. What should they do?
We'll certainly take them into account, but we are required in most cases to produce a lot of studies, and these are objective studies done by professionals. A traffic study, for instance, will predict with very good accuracy the traffic patterns that will occur on a property, on neighboring properties, on arterial and collector roads around there, and that's evidence. And so if the concern is traffic, then certainly listen to that. But if the city has asked us to pay for and produce a traffic study, it's important that they take that traffic study and accept that evidence, unless there's evidence to the contrary, as opposed to just public clamor or opinions. You
mentioned that you're required by the city or the county to produce these kinds of studies occasionally, and I know there's other requirements that you sometimes have to meet.
Cities and local governments and in some cases counties that operate as land use authorities have standards. They have development standards. They've got road standards for widths and depths and for all the infrastructure that is installed. All of the work that we do, the engineering work and the planning work, should comply with all of those standards. Once they do, and we present that objective information to a land use authority, what we'd really like to say is, this is what you've given as our standards. We've complied with that, and we need an approval so we can move forward.
So they can't just make up new standards for you. They have to follow what they have in their ordinances.
Yes, that would be, and most of them do a pretty good job of that. But on occasion, because of public clamor or for whatever reason, that doesn't happen.
So the time to decide what the city wants their plan and their city to look like is at a legislative level with the city council.
And at the general plan stage.
Right.
The general plan by statute should contain a lot of information about what the growth of the community is and what it should look like. And to the extent that the general plan is written with the market in mind,
right, it's
going to be successful. And the market changes, and that's why general plans have to change. They have to be fluid. We've seen in the last 8 or 10 years a real change in retail sales and retail sales tax and point of sale sales tax collection, and that has changed dramatically and is going to change how general plans need to look. So cities have to be willing to go back and look at their general plans and adapt those to the market and to their land use plan.
So how does that affect the market and the ability to develop a city when, because of public clamor or whatever other reason, the city deviates from that plan or deviates from their own ordinances?
There's a lack of predictability. Time is always our enemy. And so the longer it takes to navigate the process, the more expensive it is. So many times developers will either give up, in which case the community's lost an opportunity to, have some quality growth, or they'll build something that doesn't work to the market and they'll see a failed project.
So if a local government has ordinances and requirements, and as a developer, you comply with those in all respects, you expect to be approved.
We do.
You have a right as a property owner to use your land in compliance with the local ordinances.
There's a question that comes up many times in public hearings, and that is, why does a developer have a property right? They've come into this neighborhood, what gives them a property right? And the answer is that we are either the property owner, so by virtue of just being the property owner, we have that right, or we are acting as the agent of the property owner. If it's, for example, let's say it's a farmer who's been farming this 20 acres for 3 generations, and they want to sell their ground and create an inheritance for their children and their grandchildren. Well, when we enter into contract with them to purchase their property, we actually have a property right at that moment. But the current property owner has to sign the application,
Right.
Consenting to whatever change is going to be made. Let's say it's going from an agricultural zone to a residential zone, for instance, and it's fully in compliance with the general plan, for instance. Well, that property owner is actually the petitioner. Mm-hmm. They've signed the application, mm-hmm. And so yeah, it actually is that a developer has a property right. Say
I'm the neighbor. What about my property rights? I've heard that before. Or what about the city's property rights, for example?
That's a balance. So cities have the police power to zone and to create their ordinances.
That's right.
But then they're obligated to follow them. A neighbor has property rights on their property, and they have the right to speak in a hearing. Mm-hmm. But just as our property rights don't extend over to their fence, over the fence into their yard, their property rights don't extend into the farmer who's been farming for 20 years.
Everyone should be expected to follow the local ordinances in order to protect my property rights, your property rights, the neighbor's property rights, everybody's property rights.
Absolutely. And, in particularly in fast-growing cities that we've experienced over the last 20 years, although this isn't a new phenomenon, the Wasatch Front hasn't always been wall-to-wall suburbs.
Right.
It was farms, for 100 years. And little by little, we've been building our communities. It never ceases to amaze me, though, how it's usually the person who just moved in or has been there for 8 years and says to the farmer and his family who've been there for 3 generations that they shouldn't be allowed to sell their property and have it be developed into homes just like theirs, where 8 years before, a farmer sold his ground and somebody came in and put in the infrastructure and built homes, or maybe a shopping mall, or maybe an office building.
Right.
But we're building by and large on what used to be small farms.
You're trying to run a business. You would like to make a profit. You would like your property rights protected. And in all of that, you are willing and eager to be a team member in building the communities with the local government.
Absolutely. Our property values improve when we have the highest quality product.
Right.
So it's counterintuitive to think that somebody who's willing to invest and risk wants to diminish their own property values. So being a team player with local governments, we think will result in the highest quality product at the end of the day.
Is there a need for your industry? Is there a need for growth? Do we have a need for new homes and new businesses?
If there wasn't a need for it, there wouldn't be any new homes being built. If there wasn't a need for it, we wouldn't be building roads. The predictions are that in 20 to 25 years, we're going to double the population of the state of Utah. The vast majority of that is going to happen along the Wasatch Front. The vast, vast majority of that. That means we're going to go from 3 million people to over 5 million people in a pretty short period of time.
As a representative of the Property Rights Coalition and as a developer, to learn from your experiences, to learn your perspective, it's an opportunity for local governments to take that and implement it just to make their communities all that much better. And to listen to what you have to say can only help, in my opinion. So thank you. Do you have any final message you'd like to give?
Again, I'd just like to say, thank you for your service. We appreciate the relationships and the opportunity to help build your communities.
Thank you, Chris. Really appreciate you being here today. I think it can only benefit all of us. Thank you all for joining us today. And be sure to check out some of our other topics and videos on our official Land Use Academy of Utah Luau website.